Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video where I give you the extra context to the war in Ukraine as it is happening on a daily basis. I trawl my way through social media so you don't have to. Today, I am coming to you. Well, there's two things to say. Firstly, I've just watched England All Blacks, so New Zealand rugby, and I'm probably a little worse where I shouldn't be doing this. Second of all, this is the first video I'm putting on my new home for this material. So this will be on my ATP Geopolitics YouTube channel. Hopefully, people will watch this. I will see how it goes. I probably won't put every extra video on here to start with, probably alternate them, and then eventually put all of the stuff on here, and then at some point later put all of the map update videos on here. So I will be gradually moving house to this new home. Anyway, let's start off. Where are we going to start? Well, no better place than the old mobilized troops. This is coming from Tim White, whom I have interviewed, maybe. Check out my recent videos and my second interview with Tim White. Absolutely great guy to speak to. Really enjoyed talking to him and interviewing him. Please check out that material. The latest revolt from mobilized Russians, and of course, this is the umpteenth time I've shown you mobilized troops having a right old issue with their mobilization and their lack of training, their lack of equipment, and generally bad conditions. The latest revolt from mobilized Russians has come from guys from Tomsk. They were told they would be territorial defense, but now realize they will be cannon fodder and without any equipment either. So here we go. Let's watch this. We are under the command of the commander. Can you imagine? I'm reading the subtitles. We are here since the 26th. Officers were yelling at us that we are the defense forces. As a result, the lieutenant colonel came out and said, oh, I might have to just rewind that. He's speaking pretty quickly. So he's saying that as a result, the lieutenant colonel came out and said that he heard it for the first time. So I'm mixing my American and English, British English here, lieutenant or lieutenant, just to give you a bit of explanation of how I'm speaking. It turned out that we are just a shooting squad. We are stormtroopers, not the defense forces. We have not seen the machine guns yet. We have not held the machine guns for 2 weeks. Today we came to the training ground to throw grenades. We were told that there were no grenades. We did not even get the bus back. We came here on foot from the training ground. How can we fight with the officers? They will sell us there in Ukraine. That's it. So, I mean, it's not just about what the guy was saying, but how many of them are there feeling the same thing, saying the same thing, experiencing the same thing, and not being happy about it. So the whole like mobilization thing is not a good PR thing in terms of internally in Russia, externally in Russia, as you and me speaking about this. But think also about every single one of those people will have a mobile phone. There's no doubt about that. And although very few of them will be doing this kind of filming of their experiences, every single one of them will be phoning home. Again, I always talk about the little details. Think about the little things. Each one of these guys will be phoning home saying, oh my God, this is what I've experienced. This is what I experienced. This is what they've given me, or this is what they've not given me. This is where they're sending me. I'm probably going to die. And for each of those family members they are speaking to, those family members will speak to other family members. So at the beginning of the war, if you remember, there were so many accounts of people from Ukraine, and remember that most people in Ukraine will have, or a lot of people in Ukraine will have relatives in Russia somewhere, or friends, or whatever. So a lot of people were phoning back saying, "Oh, have you heard what's happening? We're being bombed. This is terrible. They've blown up this building. They've sent shells into this apartment building." And their own family members back in Russia are saying, "I don't believe you. I believe what the Russian state TV is telling me." And they were believing the state over their own family members, and just showed the extent of the brainwashing that was taking place. But as this conflict goes on, and as more and more mobilized people are sent into the front line, though the information that will get back to the general public in Russia is, I mean, it's really important. This will possibly signify a turning of the tide in terms of Russian public opinion about this war. So each mobilized person, so if you're thinking there's maybe 300,000, maybe 500,000 mobilized troops being sent into training, and let's assume, I don't know, 50% of them have a terrible experience of being mobilized. That's, I don't know, say 250,000 people contacting all their friends and relatives saying, this is terrible, this is horrible, we are not being supported, we're not being given equipment, we're being sent to die. And that kind of contagion of public opinion spreading throughout Russia is really, really important for swaying public opinion, for changing the internal opinion in Russia. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is Kherson. Been a big thing about the first trains coming from Kiev to Kherson. As you can see, the crowds here, seeing that things are changing for the better in Kherson. Okay, let's play the video. Again, nothing particularly amazing to watch here. This is a train coming into a station, but symbolically, this means an awful lot. It means a lot to these people. And again, you know, I always have to compare the reactions of people in Ukraine and liberated Ukraine back to reactions of people in occupied Ukraine under Russian control. So imagine a train coming from Russia into, I don't know, some part of Donetsk. Would you ever imagine that there would be this kind of reaction? And if there isn't this kind of reaction, the question is, why isn't there this kind of reaction? And what does this tell you about the state of affairs? And of course, it tells you everything. So, I mean, just going through or not Tim White's. This is another example. I've got so many of these videos, I can't keep track. The whole Kherson train thing, it was a big thing. And there were so many videos documenting what was happening and the experiences people were having. And here, you know, the trains coming into Kherson, people are super happy about that. People are videoing it for their own, you know, public or their own private sort of memories and experience. So, as you can see, loads and loads of videos documenting this. I've shown you sort of 3 or 4, lots about that. It's super important. Okay, moving on to the World Health Organization providing 6 generators. And this is great. WHO, who ostensibly a neutral organization, providing 6 generators to Kherson, which will ensure the operation of hospitals in emergency conditions. So I talked to you about how the Russians had stolen, where was it? Was it Novokakhovka? Or all of the equipment out of the hospital in Novokakhovka itself is a war crime. Just causing that hospital to cease to function as a place that is providing humanitarian care, irrespective of, you know, what who you support in a war, right? If you've got some kind of debilitating disease or some issue, or you've broken your arm, your leg, or whatever, or you've been in a car accident and you go to hospital, it doesn't matter, you know, what side of the war you support. The hospital is there to Hippocratic oath to help you get better. And if Russia has stolen the tools that those experts can use to help people get human beings get better, human beings in what Russia thinks is their homeland. Let's talk about Novokakhovka here as a particular example. Like, this is somewhere that they kind of have have come to control, but you could argue they see it as liberating from the Ukrainians, right? If these are the people you think are your people, right, and there's a hospital there that is supporting your people, and then you end up thinking, we're going to lose this to the enemy. let's steal all the hospital equipment that will be supporting our people. You're on the wrong side. You are just on the wrong side. It's no other way of putting it. The Ukrainians have AFU Ukrainian forces have started to remove their own minefields. This is something I've thought about loads, and it's really interesting. I need to research this, but this is pretty fascinating. To remove their own minefields in the south of the country due to special tracking systems, Ukraine has a clear overview on where their own mines lay. Both sides are throwing mines down. And I wonder about both sides. So let's think about Ukraine. Ukraine lay a bunch of mines because they want the Russians to, walk into those mines, drive over those mines, go near those mines with mechanized equipment, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's their country. So when they take it back, they need to know where those mines are because otherwise they're going to be blowing up their own citizens, their own family members, right? So it's really important they know where every single mine they lay is. So there must be some kind of tight recording mechanism. You can't just give a bunch of mines out to a unit and say, right, go and lay these mines. You need to know where every one of those mines is laid. So each one of those people doing that job must be recording that in some way that is safe, as in that information can't be leaked to Russia or the other side, well, to Russia, and that is recorded really accurately. I mean, super accurately to the meter. You might use 3 words or whatever. There are ways of doing that, obviously. So there's that, and then you got the Russians who are laying mines, but it's not their country, so I guess they're not so bothered about what happens if they lose that land. But then they've got to be thinking, well, we want all of this land, so we want to take that land back, and if we take it back, then we don't want to drive into or near our own mines. So we need to record our mines as well. So both sides surely must be recording where every single mine is placed. And I don't know, it's just something I thought about. And finally, someone's posted something about that. I'm sure someone in the comment threads can you know, inform me on exactly how that works and all the ramifications thereof. So this is no reports again saying most of the 40. I talked about this yesterday in my extra video about the PzH 2000. These are the German self-propelled guns. Self-propelled guns means these are howitzers, cannons on the back of either tracked or wheeled bases, chassis. That can be moved around rather than being towed by another vehicle. And they have the advantages of being able to fire and then sort themselves out pretty quickly compared to a towed piece of artillery and get out of there quick. Scoot and shoot. Or shoot and scoot. So after they shot, they can put the gun down really quickly and then get out of there so they can't be hit by counter battery fire. So most of the 14 transferred Panzer 2000s are already in need of repair. I talked about how they were firing 300 rounds a day, and that's just they weren't really designed and manufactured for that kind of intensive usage. After intensive use, so Germany wants to create a weapons maintenance center in Slovakia by December, but the problem is again the lack of spare parts for this. Talked about how Lithuania, I think, have agreed to repair up to 12 of these, so they're helping out as well. But again, that's probably already been done by now. The lack of spare parts endangers the combat capability of German howitzers supplied to Ukraine, says newspaper Der Spiegel, which is a German newspaper. So they recognise that yeah, we provided what is supposed to be the best self-propelled howitzer in the world. However, you are using them at a rate that we never envisaged, and as a result, they are breaking down really quickly. This is a problem because they're actually spending a lot of time not on the front line and not being used. How do we sort this out? We need to have some kind of maintenance schedule and maintenance provision that is not what we first thought when we gave you these things. Here is footage of a Russian convoy completely wiped out in the east. I don't know where, but I mean, here's evidence of massive destruction. Just to let you know, when these things rust, it's part of the burning process as they sort of oxidize with the whenever they're hit with the munitions, they basically instantly rust. It makes it look like they've been there for years, but of course, that is part of the process of hitting this stuff. But look how close these vehicles are, and the fact that They were all taken out. And, you wonder either how much uh, equipment they had in them. And if they had no equipment, of course, they are now invalidated from transporting equipment. And with the Russians being a railway army, this obviously affects their capabilities of transporting supplies with any ease. But yeah, a convoy taken out. We've seen. Okay, let's move on to a particularly somber and horrific aspect to this war. We've seen untold atrocities committed by Russia's forces in Ukraine, rape of children and women, torture, murder, wholesale destruction, the list goes on. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me say, if you are pro-Russian, and if you're down in the threads below and you are still pro-Russian after this amount of time, and given that there are over 40,000 cases of war crimes being investigated, are you definitely sure you're on the right side? Go back to what I said earlier. But Russia was committing atrocities way back in 2014, downing the flight of MH17. So this is a flight that was shot down um, back in 2014, and the flight that has been investigated in the Netherlands just the other day. They found 3 people guilty. They've acquitted someone else for a lack of evidence, but there are 3 pretty high-ranking people who have been found guilty of this, which was a civilian flight that was taken down by a Russian rocket. But here we have evidence of Russian soldiers celebrating at the destruction of a civilian aircraft. So basically, they're saying, "Yeah, yeah." I say Russian soldiers. These are probably what can be called little green men, which was Russia kind of illegally or illicitly sending in their own troops into um, Ukraine to fight with the separatist forces, but under no flag. They were kind of like, smuggled in to fight. But they are celebrating the death of civilians. So, what does that tell you about each and every one of those human beings? I certainly couldn't do that. In total, 25 torture chambers were found in the liberated territory of the Kharkiv region, where the Russians interrogated and tortured civilians. So, this is the kind of thing we're expecting to see in the Kherson region now, as they are uncovering more and more uh, previously Russian controlled areas and buildings. But and there are many first hand accounts of torture from a whole range of people, from civilians to soldiers, just war crime after war crime after war crime. Again, who do you support? Are you on the right side? Okay, today, really good news. So, from my own personal point of view as a British citizen and my government, who I don't always agree with, and when I say always, I mean arguably ever. Um, but uh, here, Rishi Sunak, that people were worrying about Rishi Sunak because you had Boris Johnson heavily in support of Ukraine, and then quickly realized that actually this was good for optics. He was getting really good optics. So back in the UK, you probably international uh, viewers might not realize that he was deeply unpopular with at least half the population. Okay, the hardcore like conservative voters were very much in support of him. But as soon as you got out of that, you had a lot of other conservative voters. So he split his party quite a bit, who were deeply not in support of him. And then everyone who is not a conservative voter, absolutely not in support of him. So he was quite a divisive leader, but in Ukraine he was massively popular. They made croissants in the form of his face or whatever in bakeries. They've named streets after him, all sorts of stuff. Super, super, super popular. So he recognized that and he used that to his advantage. And he realized that the optics were good, both the geopolitical optics, but also personal optics for him. Then he was kind of deposed, and you had Liz Truss who came in, shortest serving UK Prime Minister, but strong on Ukraine as well. And she learnt from Boris Johnson, like, okay, this is not only is it morally correct. So my point is, yes, it's morally correct, but she also would have known, all her advisors would be saying, this is really, really good for optics. This is if you support Ukraine very strongly, the British public support Ukraine strongly, and so therefore across the political spectrum, you will be seen as more in better light if you support Ukraine strongly. So yes, she would have been supporting that, hopefully with her own moral, you know, predilections and whatever. and evaluations, but also it was in her best interest to support Ukraine due to the optics. Rishi Sunak came in and he said very little about Ukraine, and people were wondering, is he going to be as strong? But again, it's a case of like, if you're not strong in Ukraine, you will lose a bit of public support. So whatever you think about Ukraine, you have to be seen to be strong on Ukraine. And he's come in and now he's visited Ukraine already. And this is great. And there are loads of videos. I could show you lots of videos of him walking around doing stuff in Kyiv and whatnot. But this is really good. This is really good because it signals a strong support for Ukraine from the incoming prime minister. And I think pretty much anyone who's prime minister of the UK, whatever political party they are in at the moment, at least, will be. So if for example Labour got in right away now and Keir Starmer became prime minister, I mean that's never going to happen. It can't happen. But if that happened, he would be equally as strong on Ukraine, primarily because of the optics, right? So this is really good for Ukraine, and Sunak here is doing the right thing. And he says, since the first days of the war, Ukraine and the UK have been the strongest of allies. True. We discussed the most important issues for both for our countries and for global security. So that's just really good news all round. Good stuff, Sunak. Okay. Uh, Careless smokers again in Russia. This is a big explosion. In fact, there have been several explosions on the eastern, in the eastern regions of Russia. So right to the east, there have been a bunch of explosions in the same district, I think, in the same region. But also a huge explosion near St. Petersburg. So, meanwhile, in Russia, something went wrong in Marino near the city of St. Petersburg. So, that is a huge explosion. That is behemoth. What is that? That looks like that, and also that is a continued fire. So that is not an explosion. That is just a one-off explosion with some high explosive or whatever. That is something that's continuing to fuel that fire. Here we have another angle of that fire, which is, pretty, I'd say, impressive, but kind of horrifying. So on and so forth. There are just plenty of there's plenty of video footage of that, as you can well imagine. A closer view of the fire following the gas pipeline near St. Petersburg. So this gas pipeline, okay, there's a lot of they'll have safety measures here that will shut off the gas, but there's going to be a lot of gas burning off there. And then going forward, I don't quite know any of the details about where that pipeline is going from and to, but that's not going to be fixed in a hurry. You can well imagine. So the question is that sabotage? Or is that just a freak coincidence? I was called out on this sometime a few weeks ago. Oh, this is all just, what? How do you know it's not coincidence? It's like, yeah, there's quite a few fires going on there at the moment. I'm pretty sure. I've got pretty good intuition that is sabotage, at least partially. I watched this video. I didn't quite know why it had been posted, but in watching it, I thought, what are these guys doing? And if I was them, what would I be doing, and what's going on here? And I guess what this says to me is well, I think, and I could be corrected, I think these guys are probably initially searching for some equipment they left behind or something, and then they realize there is a drone above them, and it looks like a game of it or a game of tag or something. It's quite a bizarre video, but it gets me thinking, oh my goodness, how terrifying. Like, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to empathize and sympathize with these guys. They could be Ukrainian or Russians or whatever. These are human beings. Just imagine, that knowing all we know about what drones have been doing throughout this whole war and the autonomous mechanization of these aerial entities that can wreak mayhem on the people below. Like, if I heard a drone above me and I was in that situation, I'd be cacking it and thinking, I need to get out of here. And I think that's what's going on here. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I could have misinterpreted this completely. You've got people running, and then they start running in opposite sort of directions because they know a drone is above them. That's all I can think. Just a really bizarre video. But then, to me, why do I show this to you? What's the point of me showing this to you? The point is if you got a drone which looks like it could well be able to drop some munition, like how would you react? I would just be running in zigzags right out of there if I knew a drone was overhead. And that seems to be what they're doing, running in circles. And then the drone, of course, actually, that's a pretty sensible thing to do. The drone's trying to work out, or how, if I'm trying to take out any one of these three, or preferably all of these three, what do I do now? They know I'm here and they're running. So, you know, yeah. And I'm going to leave you today with this. And again, it's about what represents the difference between Ukrainian soldiers and Russian soldiers. And when a place is liberated, you see this. When it is controlled by the Russians, you don't see this. And I will leave you with asking the question, you know, if you support Russia, are you on the right side? This is a soldier in Kherson, his own city, coming back home.
Questo militare bacia la terra d'Ucraina e la sua patria e dice: finalmente sono tornato a casa. Appoggia il Kalashnikov e il casco.
And there you go. Anyway, thank you for being part of this. Thank you for showing your support for this channel. Please show your support for people like this in whatever way you can. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I hope you can join me as I migrate my channel from Atypical Philosopher over to ATP Geopolitics. Take care. Question everything, particularly yourselves. I will see you tomorrow.